he fired himself, and the company grew two and a half or 2x, no 3x actually. In 2.5 years, the company grew by 3x without him being there.
And the larger the team gets, the more connections you get, and the more complex it gets, and the more difficult to get those quality communications going. And of course, the research proves that.
Welcome to another episode of the Love Not Fear podcast, where we talk about how to create company cultures where people do their job out of love and not out of fear. And today I have the pleasure of having Jeffrey Beeson on the podcast. We met at the EODF, the European Organizational Design Forum, if I got it right, in Milan. And it was quite amazing to have lots of org dev nerds there. And I'm super excited to talk to Jeffrey today because he's very passionate about creating collaborative, human-centered workplaces and focusing on how to create really good and deep connections inside of companies. He's a public speaker and also author, and he's been doing the org dev game for a while. So, Jeffrey, excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed having conversations in Milan and meeting a lot of other, as you call them, organizational development nerds. And to that degree, I mean, one of the things that I've been really looking at recently, and I've putting a lot of effort into, is my book, which is basically is being published this month, and that will be available as of the end of this month.
Let's dive straight into it. It's called Network Leadership. If you could define for us, what is network leadership?
That's right. It's good. The title is Network Leadership, and what it's looking at is basically joining two fields of study, and that is the network science piece, which is a very new science that comes from it really was officially recognized as a separate field of research in 2005, so it's not even 20 years old. But it's been extremely powerful, and it's certainly in COVID.
Do you mind elaborating what it is?
Yes, in COVID, for instance, how diseases spread is something that network science would study. Basically looking at networks, which networks, let's define that, because I do think people have misunderstandings. Networks are a basic structure, which are different agents, often called nodes in network science lingo, and they're connected, and somehow information and energy passes between them. And that's basically it. I mean, that's that simple a definition, but as you can well imagine, things can get pretty complicated depending on how the nodes are connected. So that gets, again, it requires, and the reason that this science has only developed recently is it requires tremendous computing power. So that's on the one side. And then I've done leadership for over 20 years. I've done leadership development of all kinds. And it sort of struck me just as I was sitting there in the pandemic and having a lot of time on my hands, that these two things really complemented each other. Because leadership has always been focusing on individuals, on teams, on organizations, but it seemed like something was missing, and that something was missing because, all these disruptions that are happening in the world, there was nothing in leadership theory that prepared leaders for that. And what was happening in the world were network disruptions. See, that's an interesting thing about network science, is it's studying how things are connected to each other. And what it's basically saying is that, and this is an amazing conclusion it's come up with, is that all complex systems, all, are based on network structures. And so that means that organizations are complex systems, and therefore the things that leaders are leading, the organizations that they're leading, are based on network structures. And so all of a sudden, the light bulb went off, and I said, oh my goodness, well, what does that mean for leadership? And it has some serious implications, and which are not covered by traditional leadership. So I'll give you a sort of my really quick summary here. And that is that, for instance, traditional leadership focuses on roles and responsibilities and how those are actually actuated and fulfilled, which is, that makes perfect sense. But network science says, wait a second, what you really need to be paying attention to is the space between the people, not the people themselves. Because that's where it's the interaction. It's the exchange and flow of information between people that makes all the difference in a network. And so therefore, the focus of leadership needs to be somewhere else than where it has traditionally been. And I find that absolutely fascinating. It has tremendous implications. Just that little simple statement I just mentioned to you right now has potentially revolutionary implications for leadership.
So are you talking mainly about I totally agree, everything's connected, and also I guess systemic issues. I would even go further down, saying that, as an individual, as part of the team, I guess this is one note. By the way, I'm a Linux system and network engineer in the past life. I haven't touched servers in a very long time, but I used to be very into this, so I can definitely relate. And I see it as well. And kind of going back to the individual node is the individual, right? That's kind of the smallest common
the human
denominator.
network, because they're different. I mean, a brain, for instance, the nodes are neurons. So, it depends on the network you're talking about. But in a human network, the nodes are people.
Yep. And then people are connected to work, but they're also outside connected to their friends and families, and they're also connected to their bodies, so health and etc. Right? Kind of like so, and
Exactly.
we want to make sure that all these things are in line. And it very fits to what we do with Love Not Fear, because we have this self-leadership program that is for the individuals, and then we have like org dev or team leadership programs. Because we think it's starting with the individual. If the main ingredients of your dish is good, you're more likely to cook a good dish. But so you're saying it's not only connection of communication, it's just like any interaction between.
Well, what you have to pay attention to is, first of all, the connections. How are people connected? But then what is flowing through those connections? And typically what we're looking at with networks is information flowing through it. But in human networks, you're also going to have emotions and behaviors and feelings are going to be flowing through the network as well. Those get translated. I mean, if you think of emotions, that is one of the most effective means of communications that humans have ever developed, because just by a look in your face of fear, if we're going to talk about fear, can spread fear across your entire team. And people catch that immediately without having to say anything. And so there are things that get communicated in networks, particularly human networks, that are not just information.
And so, I'm a very practical person, and I agree with everything that you said. So how do we, what do you think is the most important thing? Or where do you start? Like, do you start with having better connections, or do you start with having better communications, or do you start with, I don't know, like, telling people how to manage their emotions better? Well,
I'll come back to the statement I made. You have to pay attention to the space between the people. This is what network science is saying. And so for me, what it means is that you need to focus on improving and strengthening the quality of relationships. Because if the relationships are good, the way that communication is going to happen is going to be improved. And so it leads to an interesting sort of conclusion in terms of, for instance, mindfulness is something that a lot of people have recommended for individuals to have better well-being, to be healthier individuals, and that's of course absolutely correct. However, if I'm looking at it from a network leadership point of view, I want mindfulness because I want the interactions to be better. between the individuals. And so as a leader of an organization, I should be investing in mindfulness programs, not because necessarily, although that will be a side effect, that the individuals will be healthier, but because my company will communicate better and the quality of the information flowing inside of the organization will be better. And so I start to argue a little bit differently than I would from a traditional leadership perspective.
I agree. My interpersonal communication or in team communication is absolutely crucial. My mother told me something that has been that stuck with me, that really worked for me in communicating with people, and it is be hard in the case but soft with the person. So if I have to tell you something, let's say you're always late for meetings, I would never yell at you. I'd pull you aside and say, "Hey, Jeffrey, really appreciate you. You're doing really great work, but this late coming business has to stop. I'm happy to help you to eliminate the causes, but we really have to fix this. If you can't fix this, because it's bad for X, Y, Z reasons, we can't work together anymore." So I'm like very hard in the case. I basically tell you, if you can't fix this, I'll fire you, but I'm also very soft with the person, So I think like you can basically tell people anything you want to tell them if you do it in a proper
Well,
manner.
also, if you have good relationships, you can be a lot more honest and open. And part of the issue has been is that the quality of the connections has not been good, and I'm afraid to tell anybody something, or that it might come back and haunt me. And if the quality of connections is good, usually you have what I would the beginnings of what I would call psychological safety, and which you don't when the connections are not good. So other things that you can imply from that, if we're looking at the sort of the micro part of it, on teams and people interactions, you want small teams. It's very clear that that if I'm looking at it from a network perspective, small teams,
it's more efficient. Kind of going back from a Linux system, a network engineer.
Yeah, it
makes sense.
To do with the number of connections. And the larger the team gets, the more connections you get, and the more complex it gets, and the more difficult to get those quality communications going. And of course, the research proves that the optimal size for a team is 4 to 5 people. It's what Jeff Bezos from Amazon called the 2 pizza team. You shouldn't have teams that require more than 2 pizzas to feed. I think that's absolutely accurate. Actually, the research shows 4 to 9 is the appropriate team size. Once it gets over 9, you're bound to have real coordination and communication issues. Almost guaranteed.
I'd love to go back to the relationship piece. And do you have any exercise tips or tricks how you can foster better relationships inside of teams, aside from giving everybody mindfulness training?
Well, I call that it's a whole compound, which mindfulness is part of, which is social emotional competence. But that would be certainly one of the areas that we focus on. And of course, that has to do with also different feedback techniques and things like that, which are very traditional. So there's nothing new about that. But I think the emphasis on small teams, and also the emphasis on as much as you can autonomy, which requires feedback loops in the network. And if you can create autonomy inside of a team, then you get incredible different reactions when they have to decide, for instance, we have a few examples of it, what the compensation for each of the team members is going to be. That leads to a level of honesty and openness that you wouldn't get otherwise. And so if you can move it to that level, and that requires a feedback loops coming into the team so that they know what's happening and how their actions are impacting the rest of the organization, then you can create high levels of responsibility as well as openness and transparency.
Something that worked tremendously well in my companies is I'm part of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and there they do an exercise where it's called the Lifeline, where you share the highs and lows in your life with the group that you're in. And we started doing this with leadership teams, and it's quite amazing if somebody shares with you their highs and lows, because then it's not Stephanie from accounting or Mike from marketing. It's Stephanie who also lost her father when she was young, or Mike who also went through depression, etc. And this I found makes people connect like on a very deep level, because you take off the mask and you show like who you are, and it's not it's not.
Well, the way I see it is that the whole person needs to show up at work, not just, the mask of here I am as a productive agent, and only here to earn a living. I'm a living human being, and I have all sorts of other interests besides my work, and people should know about those things, because you're dealing with a full person, and I think that's part of it. I call it bonding relationships, that people create relationships, not just based on what they need to do at work, but who they are as people. And one of the things is that talent retention, which is such a big issue in companies, it's a network issue. And if you have the statistics are saying that if you have one friend at work, I mean, a real friend at work, the likelihood that you're going to leave the company is much lower. I mean, these are real big issues in terms of bonding, in terms of relationships, in terms of communication. And the better that you can create those areas, the better that your teams are going to work, and the longer they're going to be with you as an organization. So as a leader, you should be really interested in having people getting to know each other really well.
Actually, I have the perfect example for this at my last company, which was Max CDN, a content delivery network. So very nerdy. This is where the Linux system network engineer comes in. We had a friend of ours referred half of the company initially, and then they also brought in their friends. So we had like a very strong bond, and we never lost an employee we didn't want to lose. Sometimes when somebody was like not doing that hot and you don't give them enough tender love and care, they leave by themselves. But we never lost like a key player that we want to keep. Only one who was hired to build Apple CDN, and he's like, oh man, that's my dream job. I hope you understand. I love you guys, etc. But he left. But it's so true. Once you have good friendship and a good connection, you don't lose people. And even though we were scrappy startups, we paid way less than the market, over time. And so people just stuck around because they just wanted to be there with their friends having a good time at work.
No, and actually, I think there's a software company, and I think it's in Australia, and they're in terms of worldwide paying scales, they pay way below and as an IT software person nowadays, you can earn a big salary, but they have some of the lowest turnover in the industry. And the whole secret has to do with the internal setup of their teams, and the way that they bond with each other, and the way that they create things together. And so people don't want to leave that environment. It feels good.
So I have like in another software company of mine, we built a software for coaches, and initially we actually really follow what is it. So funny that you say this. We have like a small development team, and we gave them lots of autonomy. And so initially we had the traditional way of working. Our head of product told the developer, hey, developer A, you build this, developer B, you build this, developer C, you build this. Then they go to the dark rooms, develop something, and they come back, and marketing announces it, and then customer support deals with the issues. And then at some point they may hear something from like, hey, this was good, or this was bad after a few weeks. So we decided that everybody has to do support, because we want everybody to understand the customer issues. And then our head of product just made like a pool of ideas, and everybody could pick the idea that they want to work on, because then, it's the autonomy of picking this. And then we asked them to announce it. So the developer himself announces it to a user community saying like, hey, I just built this thing. Because then the developer got the praise for doing this, and he also got the direct feedback like, hey, why do you do like this and like that, etc. Right? And so this really changed the output of the team by 300%. 300 was like really crazy. And we did some surveys on employee happiness, and it was like really off the charts in terms of like how excited people are in there. So it's really interesting that
I'll introduce a radical thought here. One of the things that we do in our normal organizations is we create a lot of barriers between ourselves. And then part of that begins with, you get a title, you're vice president of X and Y. And it belongs to you. It's you that do that work, right? and you have the authority to make things happen there if you're, at a certain level. You know, that, what, and I'm just going to conjecture here because I'm looking at it again from a connection point of view. What if we didn't have titles? What if we had the roles defined because they have to happen? You have to do the work. I mean, I'm not saying that those roles in marketing, the VP of marketing,
Mhm.
VP of finance, these roles do exist, and then a certain work needs to be accomplished. But what if nobody actually carried that title?
Mhm.
And everybody knew that the work had to be done. And then all of a sudden they had to negotiate amongst themselves who was going to do the work. And of course, how are they going to get compensated? And of course, that can rotate. And it didn't have to be a single person. It could be a team that's responsible for a particular role. And you create a lot closer connections that way, and you create a lot less separation. And by the way, the companies who have actually done this outperform the competition. It's remarkable because they all are in it together. They know they're in it together by definition because nobody has a title. Obviously, some people do earn more than others because they contribute more, but the team decides how they're going to get compensated. And I mean, if you do these kinds of things, which sound extraordinarily radical in today's world, you create proximity, you create connection, you create a camaraderie that we're doing this together. We're not doing it as VP of whatever because I want to make the next career step. We're doing it because we want to fulfill the purpose of the organization.
It's like kind of going back to system and network engineering. We're all just IP addresses and we offer different services. There's no IP address with a different, bigger title, right? It's just, we're all equal in that sense. So do you propose in your book also to go to self-management or to network management?
Oh, yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's what networks are saying. If you take a look at networks in life, because networks are not just in organizations, you don't have a major boss that's telling the trees how to grow in the forest. They sort of do it all by themselves, right? And they figure out how to share resources underground and work with the fungi and who knows what else to make it work. And networks by design, if they're healthy, and that's the issue. If they're healthy, are self-organizing just by default. And we're having some examples now of organizations that are understanding that principle. The one that I like to mention is General Electric Appliances, which restructured completely in 2015, and now has just a bunch of micro enterprises, little groups of no more than 15 people max, and that they all are responsible for their own hiring decisions and their own compensation decisions, and they're interconnected amongst themselves inside the organization. We're talking about, I think it's over 50,000 employees, and they're out competing the competition by far. They went from fourth to first in market share within 5 years. They're been selected as the best place to work, and employee satisfaction is going up the roof. It's all self-organized teams.
How to get there? So I 100% agree with this statement that self-organization is the future. A friend of mine has a company in Turkey, a chemical manufacturing company, and they went teal, I guess, kind of following the reinventing organizations idea. And he fired himself, and the company grew 3x actually in 2.5 years. The company grew by 3x without him being there. And people decide based on they decide their salaries, they decide the increase of their salaries. It's kind of all and also the crazy thing is, he just shared with me that because of this transparency, expenses that the sales team had actually went down. Before it was sent to him to approval, but now because it's like super transparent, it went down by 20 or 30%.
Well, transparency is a really critical issue. And the more transparent networks are, the better they function. And if you want to reduce, like travel costs, you don't impose a control. And the best way of doing it is make sure that everyone knows that their travel expenses are going to be posted in a public space and people can look at them. And guess what happens? Companies who do that, they don't, no more controls. You submit it, you get reimbursed for whatever you submit. But the key point is that you need to make those documents public, and everyone can see them if they want to. And guess what? When companies do that, all of a sudden the costs of travel go down.
I did something similar at Max CDN like maybe 10 or 12 years ago. So we were CDN, we make websites load faster, and so all of our network had to be really fast. And also good customer service was one of our main promises. So what I did is I create a website called maxcdn/transparency, maxcdn.com/transparency, and we had a network map and showed like how fast we are currently in all nodes. And we also showed all our NPS feedback, from support tickets and from normal long-term Net Promoter Score, with the rating and the feedback, what people said. And first the entire team said like, dude, you're crazy, we can't do this. But now I guess it was a network effect, because now it was just like not me running after the tech team because something is slow. Also the sales guys were like, hey man, I'm pitching this big client, we can't look slow here, like come on man, let's do something. So it became like it was not me pushing things, it was like network itself. Or like when we get a bad Net Promoter Score, the entire company freaked out and figured out like, how can we prevent this, how can we make sure this never happens again. And another thing we do for transparency, it's so cool you say this, because now so many things click. We have this error log or improvement log inside of my companies. So whenever somebody messes up or something goes wrong, we add it to the error log, and we say like, what happened, when did it happen, who was affected, and most importantly, what can we do to make sure it never happens again. And this is, everybody sees this, right? And everybody can edit this, and we talk about this in the management meeting, and figure out like, how can we be a self-healing machine to make sure this error never happens again, right? Which we need trust for this transparency, because otherwise people would kind of shove it under the rug. But yeah, it's really cool.
Transparency is one of the most important pieces in a network, and again, those companies who have done this, what happens? There's a company, Nucor, which has different steel plants, and they're all self-organized. And if one of the plants does better in their numbers for the quarter or whatever it is that they're measuring, all the other plants want to know what they did. And so, they'll rush over there and check it out, because all of a sudden, it's a exchange of best practice. It's not about out-competing your other factories. It's just about understanding that they did something really cool, and you could do it too.
So I want to do too, and I'm currently implementing it in another company of mine, where we are a business process outsourcing company, and we have to recruit lots of people all the time. And now we decide to create this micro company inside of the company, which is our recruiting arm. And so we want to make it so the managed customer support arm, who's currently, it's just one where we've taken the recruiting out, and now the managed customer support can buy services from the recruiting arm, but also can go to others. But we're kind of making it standalone, so other people can also use our recruiting. And we kind of it's in the process of we're piecing everything together. What do I have to look out for? What are the pitfalls? How do you do this best?
Well, I mean, what I guess you're saying is what I would call sort of a shared service, right?
Yes.
And it has the opportunity, hopefully, also to offer its services not just internally but externally as well.
Correct.
I think it's a great development, because in a sense, a lot of the functions like HR can be embedded inside of companies and don't face the what most other people in
Outside
the
forces.
company face, which is competition. And I think it's very healthy for these kinds of functions to know that people inside the company can go elsewhere if they're not happy with your services, because then all of a
Correct, correct,
sudden,
correct. You're too
all
expensive, or like the quality is not good. And then they can either figure
send
out
signals that
they
they would
build their own
normally not
thing.
get.
Yes, they
No,
build
it
their
sends
own, or
signals
they
that they would
buy
not
from
normally
somebody
get.
else. Yep, yep, yep.
And it probably makes them a much better unit. Of course, they're going to have an inside advantage because they're inside the company and they have certain types of information that outside competitors may not have. So they should be able to survive in that environment. However, it's not a guarantee that they're going to get all the jobs. And so I find that it's sort of like a marketplace. I mean, because you're basically opening up the organization to outside influences. So what you're doing is you're bringing in external information from the outside world that wasn't in there before, and as a result, you're creating a healthier network.
So my question is, like, do you have like some, every company is different, every network is different.
Of course.
Do you have like some type of blueprint, that we can take as like okay, like best practices? You do this and this. You have like, one person being like the salesperson, one being the service delivery person, and like, yeah, just
Oh yeah. Well,
give me anything that could help.
the goal is, and I mean, having written this book, it's come very clear to me is that what I wanted to do is help organizations become what I call network organizations. But it's a big leap, particularly, if you're a traditional hierarchical organization, that's not going to be such an easy step to take. And so there have to be a lot of in-between steps. And so what I've now developed are what I call laboratories, labs.
Hmm.
And these are and they address different issues. So one lab addresses the whole issue of innovation inside of organizations. Another one talks about talent and talent retention. A third one is about purpose and the activation of purpose, and the various themes that are really important for organizations. But what they are, they're testing grounds. So you don't have to commit the entire company to make the transition in one go. What you can do is test it and see how it works and and also customize it. Because, as you said, every company is different, every network is different. And you're not going to be able to have a one-size-fits-all approach to any of this. It's all very complex. But I mean, the certain principles are going to remain the same, and that's not going to change. It's just maybe the way that the interaction between nodes and the different structures of the networks will be somewhat different. And the ecosystems that are created with the outside world is going to be different. So you do need customization. And so what we offer with these labs is for them to test it out, and perhaps in small units where there's not much risk and there's not much to lose, so that they can understand. Because I think what happens is the biggest challenge is the mindset shift. The mindset shift for leaders to move into this space. And the only way that I think that can be successfully accomplished is by hands-on trying it out and checking out for yourself and feeling that you can do this. And with a couple of success stories, then maybe the organization's then ready for a bigger leap. So that's the person I'm using right now. And we're in the early phases here, because there are some companies that have made the entire leap completely, but they're very few and a handful. The good news is those that have are showing amazing performance.
I think if you set people up, that people doing their job out of love and not out of fear, they're just going to perform better because they like what they do. They see purpose in it. They're not just a small wheel in a big machine. They actually see the impact that their
Exactly.
work is having. They
They're
interact
tied to
with
the
people that
purpose.
they like, so, and then it just becomes much easier. Kind of the point
Well,
that,
I did think a little bit about the love and fear piece, and I'd like to share maybe some thoughts on that.
please.
I think that the reason that networks don't work is absolutely fear. There's
Fear.
no question. And fear blocks, it's an impediment to the flow of information. When I'm fearful, I don't share, I don't communicate, I hoard information. Everything that is an antithesis to a network that's functioning. And if I think of it the other way around, a really good, healthy network where there's a lot of interchange of information and people are open and transparent, this is love. This is definitely love. And when you have a company that is able to create a purpose that is really shared, this is why we exist. For me, that's love in action.
100%, yes. This. Thank you for the feedback. And I feel very similarly. Fear is scarcity, love is abundance. And if I'm in a state of fear, I will not share the finding that I had with you because I want to shine. I don't want you to shine. Or if I mess something up, I pull it under the rug and make sure I hope nobody finds out. Versus like, hey guys, I messed up. How can we fix this? And we're in this together. It's like, love is connection, fear, separation. In Greek language, the devil is the one who separates. So it's like really, really stuck with me. So it's.
Well, and if we look at the logic of this to its ultimate degree, eventually, the boundaries between organizations will become very unclear. Whose organization is what? And that's then we're talking about a societal view of and beginning to develop a real sense of, this is for not just for me to make a living. This is part of my contribution to society and to
Yes.
the planet I live on.
Yep. It's what's it called? John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, wrote Conscious Capitalism, which really was a big aha moment for me.
Sure.
Making distinguishing between the old way of doing business where we have to increase shareholders' value, aka make the owners of the business rich, versus doing good by all stakeholders, meaning suppliers, customers, employees, the planet, and communities. And I think there's also the new generation is way more sensitive towards this, and they will not buy from a company who's just like.
Well, let me also give you the performance angle, because I think it's really important, because so many companies are hesitant to go this direction because they believe that, the investments are too high and the costs are too high and they're going to affect their profits and who knows what else. If we look at it from a network perspective, a network is healthy in that, the more it interacts with other networks, and the more it's embedded in a larger network, it just becomes a more powerful network. And so why do I say this? Well, what bigger network is there than the planet, right? And getting involved in environmental issues. And there's a company called Interface, which is now net zero, made a commitment to very early on in the 90s to really reduce their emissions. And now not only did they reduce their emissions, they have insisted that all their suppliers reduce their emissions. And they have helped their entire ecosystem.
Network effect.
Their whole ecosystem reduce their emissions. And they're now moving even further. They're talking about a circular economy by 2040. So they're pushing even further. But the point is that performance is remarkable. They're in a very unsexy business. They're floor tiles, office flooring, and so nothing to write home about here. But if you look at how they're performing and you look at their competitors, the last year-to-year growth for this company was 10.7%. Just released the numbers. The entire industry is at minus 0.7.
That's crazy.
And hey, I mean, the guy who started this, a guy called Ray Anderson, said, I don't understand why my fellow CEOs don't understand that this is good business.
For sure. I want to be able to share with my friends like, hey, this is what I'm doing has meaning. It's like in German language, since you speak amazing German, by the way. You currently live in Munich. in Germany, we also use the word job, which is like, if you work at a pizza joint to go through college, etc., but I can just do something for the money. But if you have a proper job, it's called Beruf, which is coming from the word Berufung, which means calling. And so I guess if you kind of really have you feel you have your calling and you can really identify with the work that you're doing, then it's not just like, hey, I'm sitting here, kind of like giving 20%, so at least I'm not getting fired, so I get my paycheck. But if you can identify this as like, hey, what we're doing here has meaning. What we're doing here is like reduces emissions, and we're like changing the game. I want to be part of something bigger. And I think this is like something that we really crave as humans versus just going with the motions and watching TV and getting drunk to kind of, numb my meaningless, idiotic existence type thing. It's a little rough.
Well,
but
unfortunately, I mean, most of our economy has been built on consumerism, and to a certain degree, getting a bigger house and getting a car has been very, very motivating for a lot of people for a very long time, and it has brought a level and quality of life that many of our ancestors never could have dreamt of. So it's been successful, but I have a feeling that the ability for that to satisfy people is reaching its limits.
I had my I guess early midlife crisis when my wife went through breast cancer. Knock on wood, she's doing great today, but when this happened, I imagined myself on my deathbed, looking back at my life and thinking, did I really do what I was supposed to do? Did I have the impact that I wanted to have? Did I live a life that I, measure as a good life? And this was, like 12 years ago or something like this. And I had the aha moment that, like, right now I'm just running after the Benjamins. I'm just running after money, and I want to do something that has more impact. And this was like my moment of awakening. And I think a lot of people are having this, sooner or later in life, like if you think like, oh, I want to have like X million in my account, and then I feel great. And then once they have this, they're like, there must be something more to life. And I think more and more people are waking up, especially the young generation. I think they're kind of like out the gate have like this mindset of like, hey, we want to do something that has more meaning.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's and I think that's part of the malaise that we have in society today, and we're seeing so many unsatisfied and disgruntled voters in the political arena. This is the real ironic part of it, is materially, we couldn't, I mean, as a species, of course, there are people in developing countries that are doing miserably, and any addition to their material wealth would really bring a lot of well-being for them. But in general, I mean, if we particularly look at the developed countries, where all the causes of mental illness are located, wow. I mean, they've never had it so good.
It's a crisis of meaning. I guess, like, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, our bottom parts are filled.
And how do we create meaning? It's through connection.
True.
Think about that. Meaning comes only through connection.
It's to be of service for somebody else, to be of service for society, to be of service for you. Yeah.
But it makes sense because all of life is connection. That's what network science is telling us. Everything is connected. And if we seek connection, if we go after connection, we're going to find meaning in life. That's why purpose works, because purpose connects us to something greater than ourselves. It connects us to the world, to society, to whatever it is. And then we feel more satisfied because it's not just, taking a paycheck at home and spending it on our own entertainment. It goes beyond that.
Beautiful.
And the more that, and that's why people stay in the workplace when they have better connections inside the workplace, because they feel that there's purpose. If they're not serving a greater purpose, at least they're serving and helping their friends. And that feels good. I mean, who I'm connected with. And so we can't underestimate how important connection is, because everything is.
And I think it's becoming more and more that, the sentence, lonely people in crowded rooms, a lot of people are disconnected.
The loneliness epidemic. Can you imagine? you're surrounded by millions of people and you feel lonely.
Lonely. Yeah, that's really
Wow.
crazy.
Wow. And it's increasing. It's going up. I mean, it's not getting better. And the solution's real simple, really. I mean, it's also like health. They always tell you health. You got to exercise, you got to have to diet, and very basic stuff, right? The same thing here, connections. It's really simple. If we pay attention to those things, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's positive peer pressure, just like in general. Like we're social animals, we want our tribe, and most people do not have a tribe anymore.
Well,
right?
they've lost it. I mean, there's this wonderful book that came out in the U.S. Almost 2 decades ago called Bowling Alone, and it was talking about how in the 1950s and 1960s there were these bowling leagues in which communities would compete with each other, and that over time has disappeared. And now when you go to a bowling alley in the U.S., you're doing it alone by yourself.
Wow, that's crazy.
If you look at maybe a couple of friends, but you're not doing it from the point of view of community. And so the point being, you just used bowling as the example because there were many other examples in the book. But the point being is that social capital, which are our connections with our other human beings in our communities and in our workplaces and so forth, has gone way down over the last 30, 40 years.
And people in the blue zones in Japan, for example, one of the key elements why people live so long is because they have a strong community, they have strong connection, etc.
Well, and if we look at it from a health point of view, those people who are well connected socially, that is going to is more important than like diet and exercise. And they've even shown that it's more dangerous to be less connected than to like smoke. Just bad enough. But if you lose connection, you will lose your health.
This was amazing. It was very insightful for me. I took a lot of notes, and I also just bought your book. I pre-ordered it on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful! Excellent.
Where can people find you?
Where can they find me? Well, the company is Ensemble Enabler, which is right above me. And it's ensembleenabler.com, and they can find me there. I'm also creating a website to go along with the book. That's easy to remember, networkleadership.net, which will go up next week, and they can find me there. And otherwise, I also have a jeffreybeeson.com, which is my public speaking site.
Beautiful. I assume people can also reach you on LinkedIn.
Oh, well, of course. Yes. Sometimes I forget that. Yes, LinkedIn. I'm there and available and active.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing so many cool things. Again, for the listener, the book is called Network Leadership, Promoting a Healthier World Through the Power of Networks. You can pre-order it on Amazon right now, and I think it's going to be, as you said, like next week it's going to be released.
Next week it's going to be officially available.
Awesome. Jeffrey, I very much appreciate you. When I'm in Munich next time, I'll let you know.
All right.
Please do.
All right. Take care.
Appreciate you. Thank you.